Presenting the dazzling new Desire, the best and beyond.
One. Well, thank you so much if you've been with us right through the last couple of days on our live blog on ESPN Cricinfo. And there is nothing quite like the IPL auction, especially when it comes in its big, massive size, as it has done this time. And it's given us so much to unpack and look forward to when we try and build the ideal teams and try and decode what the franchises went into the auction with, what they've come out with, and whether they'd be happy. Who looks strong, who doesn't. These are all questions that come to bite us 6 months later in the IPL. But it'll be fun to have the conversation with you here on Auction Day Live, powered by Maruti Suzuki Arena. And I've got Sriram and Dustin Salgado, my fellow Chatterati, who was unavailable for the start of the auction and has joined midway, like many overseas players tend to. Dustin, I hope you're feeling well.
I've been roused from my sick bed by the auction.
Yeah, you can't miss this. This is where all the attention is. Forget Test cricket and whatnot. No, I won't do that. I love it. And Sriram has also been busy on his laptop, as he has been as a scout over the years and in franchise dugouts. And Tom Moody, who would much rather be talking auctions with us and not Test cricket and all that, after, especially with the way Australia were hammered. Right, Tom?
I didn't realise the Test series had started yet, Raunak, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's why BCCI and the Indian team agreed to 5 tests, because you knew Australia will take a test or two just to show up. So, yeah, right. All that for later. Matt Roller, who just adds such great insight, will also join us as he decodes these teams with us. Matt, I don't mean that with any sarcasm. I always enjoy your breakdown of the teams. And tell me first off, though, if you have to pick your 1 or 2 big wow moments or takeaways, or, oh, okay, that's happened this time, where would you start, Matt?
Well, I think the story of this auction has been on some Indian players on day one, really. Particularly, obviously, Rishabh Pant takes the headline, but I think Venkatesh Iyer as well went for big money, Shreyas Iyer as well. And it feels to me like there's been a bit of a readjustment. Maybe it's just because it's the mega auction and teams are looking to get that Indian core for the next 3 years sorted. But it feels like there's been a big adjustment in terms of the balance spent on Indian players as opposed to overseas players. I think Josh Butler's still the biggest buy for an overseas player in this auction, whereas quite often we see huge money go for some of the overseas seamers, for example, in the past couple of years, or all-rounders. So I think that's been the sort of overall trend of the auction, slightly less spending on foreign players and much more so on Indians.
I think that's a nice way to start, because Sriram, Dustin, what we have seen is teams are actually not even targeting the completion of the 8 all-rounder, the 8 overseas players.
Yeah.
And often we used to have that thing that, if you don't pick 8 overseas players, you perhaps not got your auction right. But this is in 1 or 2 teams. And even if I look at the teams that have 7 or 6 players out of their overseas, there's still a last round going on as we record this. But with the kind of players, with due respect to them, they're not going to be starters. Does that tell us there's been a shift, a significant shift in strategy on the devaluing of some sorts of the overseas players?
And also, they've not filled up their squads. They're happy with 19 or 20, so that's probably one of the reasons why they didn't want to go for the 8 overseas slots. Sometimes the overseas players come here and just have a holiday. So you'd rather have people fighting for slots and working hard for the franchise than having overseas players who come here knowing that they're not going to play. And
yeah, I mean, it's in stark contrast, those numbers, with Josh Butler at nearly 16, as Matt points out. And 11s and 12s suddenly seem to be pretty budget numbers. Not for us, but certainly historically from the IPL point of view. It is something that we've also discovered, Dustin. It wasn't as easy when we were even trying to put the ideal 12s together to actually nail the 4 overseas. And we may very well be surprised come the IPL with teams playing 3 overseas, teams playing a lot more Indians.
Yeah, I think most of the teams who really wanted overseas players already had them among their retentions. And so that's why the players they wanted to add. So, for example, yesterday, I think out of the total spend, about 37% was just on the top 10 Indians. And then only about 25% was on the top 10 overseas. So that's a definite trend that the teams wanted to spend more on the Indians. And yeah, I think with a lot of overseas players, they thought, okay, we'll just get players later at base price to just fill in those slots. And of course, there's always the rule where if somebody gets injured, you can bring in a replacement, which also affects things.
And that happens ever so often, and quite a few injury replacements happen with the workload of cricket in T20 and internationals now. But Tom, just weigh in over here. It almost seemed like even if you wanted an international player, the fact that they come in at pretty high base prices. By the time we came to the second half of the second day, very few teams even had the money. So am I overdoing the whole clear strategical shift to Indian players and not as much importance to a percentage of overseas? Or did this come as a surprise perhaps even to those sitting on the table?
No, it's pretty much what I expected, to be honest with you, because I always look at it in sort of a supply and demand situation. There's limited supply of high quality Indian players because you're fishing from one pool, where when it comes to the international, you're fishing from many different nationalities that give you various options at various different price points. Yes, there's the odd exception, which we've touched on with regards to a Butler or a Stark or an Archer or whoever it might be, right in that sort of top end. But I can understand the focus being on trying to scoop up the very best domestic options and then considering your overseas options, purely because if you miss out on player A or B, player C, D and E aren't too far off what your first two preferences are. So to me, it makes a lot of sense. I'm a little bit surprised that a couple of teams have left themselves only with 6 overseas options, purely on the basis that it just limits their flexibility from a team perspective, and also just from the depth of covering, whether it be a fast bowling unit or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out come the first match.
All right, well, it's time to now do what we all enjoy doing at the end of big auctions. SWOT analysis of every team, try and build their best 12. Remember, the impact player is very much here to stay in the IPL. So we'll go one by one. The final moments of the auction are still taking place in Saudi Arabia as we speak, but most of the teams have, I guess, pretty much secured their squads or do not have much to really add with their balance purse. We can start with the teams we know will not be adding more, because Chennai and Punjab are 2 teams that have actually sorted out 25 players, which in itself is quite the talking point. And as you can see, there are 7 overseas slots and not a full complement of 8. They had a considerable core retained, including MS Dhoni, of course, as an uncapped, and they've added to it some regulars returning, Devin Conway, Rachin Ravindran, and some players who played for them in the past who will find Chepauk as their home once more. R. Ashwin returns to his home state, so too Vijay Shankar. Sam Curran, who's always enjoyed playing there, and there are familiar names in the form of Mukesh Chaudhary, as well as some of the others on that list. Noor Ahmed was quite the story for them, the dramatic fashion in which they doubled a revised RTM bid to get him. Khalil Ahmed. Nathan Ellis moves from Punjab to the Chepauk, and towards the end of the day, they added to their domestic contingent Shreyas Gopal, Kamlesh Nagarkoti, some local talent in the form of Andres Siddharth, as well as R.K. Ghosh. So that is the story for you. And as we've seen with CSK, Deepak Huda, Rahul Tripathi, Vijay Shankar, a lot of players who may not have found a lot of love previously, CSK might just breathe some life into them. Gurpreet Singh has actually been picked up for a decent amount of money, 2.2 crore for Gurpreet Singh, who also again plays his local cricket in Tamil Nadu. Right, let's start with that team and try and look at potential holes, if any, or whether that looks strong. Sriram, what are your first impressions of CSK?
Yeah, very typical CSK. They've got 9 medium-paced bowlers. They've got a solid spin attack. But one thing that stands out is a lack of a power hitter. Shivam Dube is their big one. They usually have, if I can call Daryl Mitchell, Ben Stokes. You've got that high-profile number 4 overseas batter who packs a punch, but that's missing this time. Whether there's a change in strategy to go a little more spin-heavy and batters who play spin well, and that's why it tells me that Sam Curran may be that floater who can bowl the new ball and bat at 4.
Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, I always like CSK's auction strategy because it's so simple. They go after players who they know, like they'll go after Conway, Rachin Ravindra, and then I think bringing in Sam Curran, actually I think he could be maybe that power hitter because he's done that role for CSK before, and CSK have this habit of getting the best out of players, and Curran can be a player who strikes at 160, 170 in the middle order. So I actually think they've covered their bases pretty well.
Okay, let's bring in what we think is a probable 12. Let's look at that and see if indeed this might be somewhere close to what CSK will feel come the IPL in 2025. And Tom and Matt can decode this. Now, we've gone for Devin Conway over Rachin Ravindra at the top. I'll ask Tom if there's a case that Devon and Rachin Ravindra could play in there, if they're missing some power. We've played both Tripathi and Vijay Shankar at 3-4. Shivam Dube, of course, numbers are flexible according to situation. Sam Curran is there as a starter. Jadeja, Dhoni, Ashwin, Noor Ahmed in a high spin attack or high-powered spin attack. And Khalil Ahmed, along with Matisha Patirana, is where we start our CSK 11. Tom, break that down. Does that look like the ideal team, or could there be some potential swaps there?
Yeah, look, it's a tricky one, this one, because, I think Sam Curran suddenly becomes a really important player for them, because without him playing as the fourth overseas player, you're then, you're denying the opportunity to play Noor Ahmed, and I'm sure that they'll be keen to play Noor in there playing 11. Sam Curran provides them balance with and depth in their batting, but it also gives them another medium-paced bowler. Without him in the side and playing Rachin Ravindra, you then lose that, other seam options. So they're really only playing two quicks and multiple spinners. We know they're always going to play plenty of spin, but I think Sam Curran suddenly becomes a really important figure for the balance of their side. Yes, they can twist it as many ways as they like and look at different combinations. But I think you and the team that have put that playing 11 together is, I think are pretty close to the market to how it's going to probably look to begin with.
Yeah, if we look at possible permutations for that, now we've not put Deepak Hooda in that team. He could compete with either Rahul Tripathi or Vijay Shankar, we think. There's also Jamie Overton, Matt, who was picked up. Nathan Ellis as well. Now, whether Nathan Ellis is cover for Patirana, there could be a day when they play Patirana and Nathan Ellis and maybe not have the excessive spin, even though Noor Ahmed was picked up for big money. It seems like Ashwin will almost play every game with the kind of money you paid for him. And even though you have Jadeja, I don't think CSK would have too many problems playing both Ashwin and Jadeja. Break that down in terms of how close that is and what the potential alternatives are.
Yeah, I would see the other three overseas players in the squad as sort of covering individuals within that. So I think Ravindra would be covered for Conway, Overton for Curran, and Ellis would be covered for Patirana. I think what I see in that Chennai squad in particular is a side that are probably expecting their home venue to behave slightly differently to what it has in the past couple of years, because Chipawk historically has been a ground that suited spin bowling. In the last couple of years, it's been a bit of a mystery. It's been, much more high scoring than we're probably used to. And also there's been quite often been a heavy chasing bias because of the dew. So it'll be really interesting to see how that strategy evolves, because they've got three spinners in Jadeja, Noor Ahmed and Ashwin, who you'd expect would be locks in the playing 11, given the outlay that they've put on them. Although the one sort of counter to that is that, we know the history of Chennai. They don't always necessarily, the fact that they've spent big on a player in the auction doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to play a huge role in season. They won't feel any sort of pressure of the price tag to do that. But yeah, I think it's a really strong team, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Hooda play as well. And he seems like the sort of guy that, he's obviously had a couple of quiet years, but had a really good IPL in 22 with LSG. And he seems someone a bit like a Shivam Dube, who maybe after that quiet phase might do really well and flourish in that environment under Fleming and Dhoni, and obviously now Gaikwad as well.
I mean, when you look at that team, Sriram, I guess if there were any other team but CSK, and you said there's Tripathi, Vijay Shankar and Deepak Hooda, who are your Indian batting core along with Gaikwad and Dube, but you'd be thinking, are these all players past their prime and all? We don't seem to feel that for CSK, right?
Somehow they got the best out of people like Raidu, Robin and Rahane.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty similar kind of lineup for the next 3 years. Tripathi, Hooda and Shankar.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I don't think Noor Ahmed is a guarantee every game. They'll be very flexible with not wanting him if it's excessive spin needed, and then they'll play around with either Nathan Ellis.
Yeah, and that's why they've got so many Indian seamers. I think probably the one disappointment would be just with the Indian seamers.
Yeah.
Because they did bid for a number of Indian seamers they didn't get. I think they bid for Deepak Chahar, of course, but they also went for Mukesh Kumar and Akashdeep. So they wanted a slightly higher profile Indian seamer along with Khalil, which they didn't get. And then they went for Anshul Kamboj and some of the younger seamers as their sort of second and third options. because they didn't get those three names that they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, Anshul Kamboj could easily be in that team, right?
Yeah.
High player, and they paid 3.4 crore for him, had an excellent time with the emerging side in Oman. He's highly rated. They've paid good money for Gurpreet Singh. Kamlesh Nagarkoti picked up late in the day, and who knows, maybe one of the players that they picked up late is actually part of the plan. Shardul Thakur, though, was not. That's quite a miss for someone who likes, CSK like familiarity. MS Dhoni, I'm sure, has an input even now. Any surprises on Shardul Thakur? While we're talking CSK, I just want to bring that up.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I think he's someone who was at least very close to playing for India till Gautam Gambhir took over, and suddenly it's a rude shock for him.
I'm not going to spend too much time on this because so much happens between auction day and match day of IPL that you never know how many of the players we spend a lot of time on saying, oh, their IPL career is over and whatnot, and suddenly they come back as replacements, and there's new life that's breathed into their IPL career. Sandeep Sharma is just your classic example. Right, so that is CSK for you. We give it a strong rating. This is a team that will compete, successful team that it is.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, if the pitch behaves the way they expect it to, yes.
Of course, they decide how the pitch behaves. What do you do? It's not the other way around. Right, Tom? This looks like a team that will once again be right up there in the race for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're going to be in the top half of the tournament.
Matt?
Yeah, I'd be shocked if they didn't make top four.
Okay, well, that's always a shock. And no one dare predict that they will not make the top four. Take it from me. Right, let's go to our next team, shall we? The Super Kings looking good. And we now move to Punjab Kings. Right, let's go to the other Kings. Let's first look at the overall squad. Remember, they went in with a plan here. Let's have maximum balanced purse and retain only two uncapped Shashank and Prabh Simran. And a lot of that purse went away very quickly because Arshdeep Singh was RTM'd at 18 crore. Yuzvendra Chahal was bought at 18 crore. And in between them, the man that they paid the most money for, Shreyas Iyer, in all likelihood will lead and was paid a truckload of money when he came in the early marquee set. Interesting choice of overseas complement. Stoinis, Maxwell, Inglis, Hardy. I don't know if you're finding anything in common. I can't see anything there. There's also Marco Janssen, Lockie Ferguson, Azmatullah Omarza, and Xavier Bartlett to round up the overseas. And other notable acquisitions, it's always nice to see Nehal Vadera at his home state. He leads Punjab in Mushtaq Ali. They've got some Indian seamers in Vaishak Vijay Kumar, Yash Thakur, and Harpreet Brar has been quietly such a keen contributor to them over the years. Mushir Khan, Sarfaraz's brother, picked up towards the end of the auction as well. Right, let's take first impressions. Tom, break this one down in terms of how Punjab's business has unfolded with the maximum purse. What do you give them?
Yeah, I think firstly, I was a little bit surprised at the price that they paid for Shreyas Iyer. Yes, they wanted a captain. Yes, Ricky Ponting wanted to reunite with him from his Delhi days, but that was one that really set them back after coming into the auction with a huge advantage. The thing that puzzles me a little bit with the makeup of this side is really the middle order overseas options they have with Maxwell, Stoinis, Janssen, Hardy. There's a lot of players of similar roles within that setup, so it's going to be very interesting to see how they try to stack up. Again, probably a little bit light with the depth with their bowling options. They're relying on, obviously, Marco Janssen, I would imagine, being their starting 11. I think they're relying on, him being a regular feature and guaranteeing 4 overs. We've seen in recent past in the IPL, Marco Janssen can run hot, but he also can go missing, particularly in those big overs. He's not someone you want to be throwing the ball at, whether it be the last over of a power play or the back end of the innings too often, because he has been punished before. So I think there's a few little gaps in there, but there's a lot of talent in there as well. So if Ricky Ponting can get them firing, they're going to be a side that's going to be tough to turn over.
Let's put the 12s together. Often when we see so many names, we aren't quite sure of boxes that are ticked or holes that might be obvious. Now this is, again, we've tried to put some work into this and figured what gives every team batting till 8, which is something you almost think is a given with the impact player, and at least 6 bowling options. So this was the combination we went with. There might be a completely different team, like we say, But Prabh Simran as a retained player with Stoinis to open. I'll get Tom's thoughts again on that and the rest of the panels. We put Josh Inglis in there as a more reliable keeping option. Prabh Simran did not keep a lot for Punjab last season, even though they had Jitesh. He was often subbed out. So you can have your opinion on that. Shreyas Iyer, we think, is certainly going to be captain. Glenn Maxwell and Nehal Vadera form the middle order, along with Shashank Singh, who was terrific for them last year. Janssen and Brar give all-round depth and flexibility. One of Yash Thakur and Vaishak Vijay Kumar as an Indian seamer. Arshdeep is a lock-in, as is Yuzvendra Chahal. Matt, break that one down.
Well, I think it'll be a fun team to watch for sure. I'm not necessarily convinced that it's quite as strong as we would have expected Punjab to be, given the purse that they came in with. I think there was a lot of expenditure on that Indian core that they assembled on day one of Shreyas Iyer, Arshdeep Singh and Yuzi Chahal. And as a result of that, I think they maybe look a little bit light in terms of the overseas players. It's not necessarily obvious what the combination is going to be. I think Lockie Ferguson, for example, could be a contender to play, given it's probably not a huge amount of ball speed. But yeah, I think it's. I think when it clicks, it'll look really good.
We thought about that one, didn't we, Matt? That if you put in the overseas seamer, and I actually had one of Ferguson or Bartlett first in that, it then just reduces. We'll just bring that 12 up again for you. The minute you put in the overseas seamer, you're then a bit light on your batting. Everyone's batting a position higher then.
No, you would have to play Mushir or instead of, say, a Josh Inglis, something like that.
No, they spent 4.8 crores on Priyansh Arya.
That's a good point. So Priyansh Arya, who they spent a big amount of money for, and who's known for 6 sixes in I think the Delhi League it was. So you sense that he could be a.
If he and Stoinis opens, Prabh Simran bats 3 and keeps wickets, then it makes you possibility to play Lockie Ferguson and Marco Janssen. Because if you have 110 crores, me personally, I may be biased, I would be very comfortable with a Stark in my team or a Hazelwood or one of the big bowlers who can be a banker for me. And
well, what I'd say to that, Sri, is only, are Lockie Ferguson or Xavier Bartlett in that category?
No, not in my mind.
Therefore, my conundrum. If they had a screaming overseas quality bowler to lead their attack, that's
I think Sriram's talking more about the auction strategy, that with the amount that they came in with, they should have got one of those big name overseas fast bowlers rather than Janssen and Bartlett.
That's a whole then, you sense. Yeah, very fair. Tom, you can have your say on what you sense could be a better combination. Do you see Stoinis opening firstly? That's one thing we've just assumed and thought that's their best team. Maxwell's role a little more in the middle order, and Josh Inglis, who we've put in, but there is the possibility of them playing Prabh Simran as an Indian keeper and giving themselves a little more flexibility with perhaps an overseas seamer or even Azmatullah Omarzai.
I think the 12 that you had up there is probably pretty close to what it's going to start or look like at the start. I don't think Stoinis will open. I think Inglis will open and Stoinis will bat 3 would be my only change in that top 3. And then they'll be pretty flexible with the way they use Maxwell as they have done in the past. But, they've got plenty of options. But I do agree with what Matt said with regards to ball speed. There's no one that really is going to be able to have an impact and come and bowl 90-plus mile an hour to, just to change the game if you've got an opposition that might be vulnerable to pace or a certain couple of players that might be vulnerable to pace. There's a little bit of predictability with the speeds there. But I like the spin options they've got there. Harpreet Brar, I thought, was excellent last season for Punjab and very reliable left-arm spinner. And obviously, Yuzi is, he's been there and done it many times over and, he's finally had his payday.
Matt, you want to finish that point? Sorry if I cut you in there, but yeah, go on.
No, not at all. I think Chahal is a really interesting one, actually, given the jump in his price tag. I think it'll be, it's a big challenge for him. He's going to have to be a big wicket taker in that team. We obviously saw the success that he had at RR in partnership with Ashwin, but I think that's going to be a really interesting one to develop. Is can he sort of be the main strike bowler in that attack through the middle overs?
Yes, Sriram.
No, and what RR did very well with Yuzi was take him deep into the 18th over as well. Would Punjab look to do something like that if they've got to potentially make him more of a wicket taker?
I mean, Chahal is certainly, you'd think, one of the big pluses for them. But after spending the kind of money, after having the kind of money you did, do you sense somewhere they were left hamstrung by how much they ended up paying for Shreyas Iyer?
Yeah, 100%. I think Delhi pushed them to the brink, and Ricky Ponting was very desperate to get Shreyas, and it was almost relief for him.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is they didn't retain any players, but they spent 62.5 crores on 3 players, which is much more than what other teams had spent on retentions, right?
Yeah, those
if you
three
retain
being
just
Shreyas,
Arshdeep and
Chahal,
Yuzvendra,
yeah.
so they went for actually more than what other teams had spent in just retaining 3 players. They could have, say, retained Arshdeep, Rahul Chahar, and somebody else at a lower price, and then gone for maybe big name overseas bowler. I think even a top order overseas batter, they've got Inglis and Stoinis, who haven't had the kind of recent form in the IPL that, say, a Phil Salt or a Jake Fraser McGurk have had. So that's where there might be a little bit of disappointment there.
Yeah, I guess the key is if they could have cracked a deal with Arshdeep and said, will you be happy to stay on at 15, 14, give us a little more to play with. As it turns out, the viewers might think 18 anyway doesn't make a difference, but you could have...
No, but you would have still had 18 deducted from the purse, so it wouldn't have mattered.
Correct, but if you... as the only cap player. Sure, good point. Last word on you, Tom, on this. Overall rating, do you sense this is a team that is going to have a challenge after everything that's come together, or do you think they've done as good as they possibly could? Another thing I'll throw in there is they did think a lot about RTMing a number of their players, and quite a few of them went at lesser prices. Rabada they thought long for, but he was more than what they paid for. They didn't RTM either Livingston or Sam Curran.
Jitesh Sharma.
If that would have made a difference. But yeah, your thoughts on the overall verdict on Punjab?
Well, I think it's got Ricky Ponting's, fingerprints all over this. You can see the number of Australians in there. To me, it's going to need his magic wand to be able to sort of pull off something here, because I don't see Punjab as a side that's going to be, a team you look at and think, oh yeah, you can just about certainly lock them in for a top 4. They're going to be a consistent side, winning home and away.
Before I move to the next team, I just want to bring back the CSK team, if I could just request my producer to do that. Just the CSK squad. I'll just bring in one question, which I think I forgot when we were breaking down CSK, and we all seemed quite happy. Just the overall squad for CSK. And only one thing that I want to ask the panel is whether they have cover for Dhoni, if they would have wanted an Indian keeper going forward, or is that not something they need to worry about? Conway is, we've said time and time again, an option as a keeper, but there isn't really a seasoned keeper in the rest of the domestic options also as backup. Is that at all something that CSK you thought could have considered? Anyone?
Yeah, I think they thought all along that Conway, would cover that. I see Conway as their first choice batter in that overseas group, so he can double up as the keeper if there is any issue with MS.
All right, I'm not sure if Tripaঠি's ever kept wicket, but anyway, just leave
yeah,
it.
he has.
They usually have a Parthiv or a Saha in the team, but they never end up playing. But
Yeah,
I think Vansh Bedi is the keeper, but of course he's...
And there was some bidding for him,
debutant.
wasn't there, towards the end? Vansh Bedi.
yeah.
Right, there you go. So just wrapping that up. That's CSK and Punjab done. Much more optimistic is the panel about the Super Kings' chances. Punjab Kings, well, the IPL's funny. Many times what we talk about here has no relevance at all come the actual season. Let's go to our next team, shall we? And that term is actually most appropriate for Gujarat Titans, because I remember very well doing this show after their inaugural auction, and we thought there are a lot of holes in this team, how they're going to fill it up, and they just were outstanding under Hardik Pandya and Ashish Nehra in that first season. They won the whole thing, so we've learnt our lesson in that sense. Gujarat was hailed as the team that did the smartest business on day 1, and let's ask the panel now what they think about day 2. Rabada and Butler were key pickups in the first marquee set when all the money was being splashed on the Indians. They've also changed their pace bowling lineup. They've moved on from Mohammad Shami, and they've gotten Mohammad Siraj and Prasidh Krishna. Amongst the other notable pickups today, Washington Sundar, and what we all believe was quite a reasonable and bargain buy. Gerald Coetzee has been added, Shafin Rutherford as well, and Glenn Phillips towards the end. So some proven internationals in that sense, and some senior domestic players as well. Ishan Sharma, Jayant Yadav, Sai Kishore, who's been with the team. Karim Janat's an interesting late inclusion. And that is pretty much the Gujarat Titans side. Let's get reactions on what we make of their overall performance. Sriram?
I think they've done really well. It's one of the teams that had one of the better auctions. They've covered all bases. They've got that like-for-like replacement for David Miller, which I thought was a hole. They've got Surfin Rutherford. They've got a right and a left-hand option in whichever way they want to go. Sai Kishore is a fantastic addition. They RTM'd him. So, again, a very, very good finger spinner to complement Rashid Khan. They've also got Washington Sundar. So, they've got the ball turning both ways along with the magic of Rashid Khan. And they've got an experienced pace bowling attack. Kutsia is a great backup for Rabada.
All right, I'm going to bring the 12s that Dustin and me worked and tried to put together. And Matt can perhaps help us with this as too, Tom, because we're trying to think whether Shafin Rutherford's a number 4 in this team or is Washington Sundar a 4. I mean, those positions are all flexible. The way I saw this, Matt, was Gill and Butler certainly at the top. Sai has batted 3, even though Shubman and Sai forged a pretty good partnership towards the end of last season. So we've gone 1, 2, 3 there. Then I look at the other 4 players in one bunch: Rutherford, Washington Sundar, Shah Rukh Khan and Tewatia, depending on situations. I'm happy with both Rashid Khan and Arshad Khan as all-rounders, and even though that's Arshad batting at number 8 or 9, I think Rashid at 8, Arshad at 9, Rabada, Prasidh Krishna, Mohammad Siraj. Take me through that one from your point of view, Matt.
Yeah, it looks a really strong side to me. I think Gujarat have probably had the best auction out of anyone personally. I think they did really good work in the retentions, first of all. I think to have got Sai Sudas and Shah Rukh Khan and Tewatia for the total outlay of 16.5 crore for those 3 players was, I don't know how they managed to convince them that was all they were worth, but I think that was great business. And they got some big names in early yesterday in Butler, Siraj, Rabada and Prasidh Krishna, and have filled it up really nicely with role players as well. I think, we've not got, for example, Sai Kishore in that 11 who they write to match today. But I think he's a really good option for, when they play, for example, Chennai away, or when they play on other pitches that they might expect to turn. I wouldn't be surprised to see Glenn Phillips get a go at some point, potentially as well in the middle order. They don't particularly lack for left-handers, so I think he could potentially replace Rutherford in that starting or in that 12 that we've suggested there. Mahapal Lomror is a good option as well. I think they've just got a really, really solid squad, in my opinion, where they, even if a couple of players aren't in the best form at the start of the season, they've got reinforcements who will be ready to go off the bench.
Yep, Tom, take it away.
Yeah, look, I think I agree. I think they've had an excellent auction, a good first day and backed it up again today. They've seemed to have everything covered. They've got a lot of experience in the likes of Rabada and Butler as early additions. They got the depth of pace bowling with Krishna and Mohammad Siraj. So they've got a quality pace bowling attack. They've got a quality spin bowling attack. I see if they're going to play Washington Sundar, they're basically looking as a pure batsman. So whether it's Lomror or Sundar there at that position at 5, I think Shafin Rutherford is showing that he's more than capable of batting at 4, but I'd probably imagine he's going to be more sort of suited at 5 towards the back 10 overs of the game. But again, he's a great like for Miller, who they've had a lot of success with in their first 3 years. So they've ticked every box. They've got a nice balance there, and they've got plenty of options, depending on the conditions.
I'll just quickly double check with Matt once, because I don't think Josh Butler keeps wicket anymore for England since Phil Salt's been there, and he's not kept wicket for Rajasthan Royals, but in that team, we're assuming Butler will happily be the team man that we know him to be and take the gloves. Matt?
Yeah, I think it's been a workload thing more than anything with England. I think it sort of got on top of him a bit at the T20 World Cup, the 3 roles of opening, captaining and keeping wicket. He's obviously less likely, he's not going to captain this side, is he, with GT? So I think he'll be more than happy to take the gloves as required. The only slight concern about Butler, I suppose, is his fitness, because of the fact that he has had a few calf issues recently. But he's back at the moment over in Abu Dhabi playing in the T10, and he got through the series in the Caribbean absolutely fine. So I'm sure GT will be tracking that closely and making sure he arrives in March in full form and fitness.
All right. Any other thoughts on Gujarat?
Just that I think one of the things that they used Shah Rukh Khan to convince him to stay at 4 crores was going to bat at 4. Okay. Because towards the the later half of the last season, they batted him at 4, and he got a 58 RCB as well in Bangalore. So one of the carrots that they dangled was that you're going to be a permanent number 4.
Yeah, and that may be
So that
something
might be
that makes sense, in fact.
Yeah, that could be Rutherford or Phillips at number 5 then.
Yeah.
Possibly. I think also it would be interesting to see on the subject of sort of pitches what they ask the Ahmedabad crew to put together, because the kind of bowlers they have, if they get a pitch that gives them some bounce, that's going to really favor them, I think, because Prasidh, Rabada and Siraj would all be bowlers, I think, who would like a bit of seam movement and bounce early with the new ball.
Yeah, I mean, we've also seen very different conditions when there are afternoon games there.
Yeah.
And we don't need to be reminded in our part of the world that bloody dew comes in at Ahmedabad ever so often. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, in fact, I've missed one more thing. Let me just quickly do that. Give every team a rating. So we've done 3 teams so far. We can go with GT since we're on the subject of GT. Out of 10. Let's get everyone's thoughts in. Dustin?
8.5.
Sriram?
Yeah, 8.5.
8.5. Tom, for Gujarat?
9.
Matt?
I'll give him a 9 as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to give them a 9.5. Wow. Just for Butler, who I said is going to be the most expensive overseas player, and they proved me right. Right,
I
well
also
then,
said that.
Yeah, let's go to Punjab Kings before this and just get a rating. We were all a little concerned about the overall look of the squad. Tom, let me start with you this time.
6.5.
Matt?
6.
6 is in play at the moment. Sriram?
7.
Being a little kind, more generous.
I'd say 6.5.
Oh, God. 6.5. Right. I wrote 7 and I scribbled it off. You can do all the average mean. And if you're watching on our YouTube live, please feel free to send us questions in case I missed something. Help me out over here. CSK. Sriram?
7.5.
Okay, Dustin.
8.
Tom?
7.5 for me.
Matthew?
8 for me.
I've learned my lesson. 8.5 CSK. Because everything they've done, they're going to do right.
Wow.
Yeah, they're going to do right. It's just going to all come together beautifully. Right. Delhi Capitals. Now, I'm very curious to discuss this team because I think there were some concerns, some apprehensions, all the opinions on Pant being released and the new look squad and a new look coaching staff. And let's see what they go home with after the auction. Now, big signings on day 1. Mitchell Starc, KL Rahul, Harry Brook, Fraser McGurk, RTM'd for 9 crore. I think it just got better and better with the acquisition of Natarajan, the hitters like Samir Rizvi and Ashutosh Sharma, who were rated very highly in India. Mohit Sharma with his experience. Faf du Plessis was an interesting one. But if you look at the overall squad, Mukesh Kumar as well, RTM'd. They've got Dushmanta Chamira and Donovan Ferreira as additional overseas options. And Darshan Nalkande continues to just add value wherever he goes around in the IPL. Did play for Gujarat Titans in an IPL final. So let's look at a playing 12 too, straight away, to just give you some perspective. Because this looks really impressive from Delhi Capitals, in my opinion. KL and JFM at the top. Porral potentially at 3 taking the gloves. They have lots of keeper options in that team, to be honest. Harry Brook and Tristan Stubbs is what we've put together. And that's because how heavily they've invested in their Indian bowling and Starc. So you got Aksar, Ashutosh and Rizvi batting till late. Mitch Starc, no mug at 9. And Mitch Starc along with Natarajan, Mukesh Kumar and Kuldeep Yadav. There's a lot of bowling options there. You got 4 on the right. You got Aksar Patel. It's only 5 specialist bowlers as things stand. But that's the team we've gone with. So let's try and break this one down. Sriram.
Yeah, no teams won the IPL without 2 overseas bowlers. Can they change that? So they really got no option but to have that sort of combination where they play 3 overseas batters and Mitch Starc, and if Mitch Starc gets injured,
Dushmanta Chamira
Chamira is their backup.
Yeah, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty strong side. The only thing I'd say is that, yeah, as you were saying, there's in the first 12 that we've gone for, there's only 5 bowling options. The 6th is Stubbs. So, who's a right arm off spinner. He does bowl sometimes, but he hasn't been used regularly in the IPL. So, maybe all-rounders is a place that they could have gone for.
One of the late acquisitions was Manwant Kumar from Karnataka, who's done very well in the Karnataka League. He's a medium-pace bowler batter who can slog it.
Yeah, okay.
So I've got him at number 8.
Instead of, say, Mukesh.
Let's put that team up again. Yeah. So you're saying the late pickup that they had of Balwant Kumar.
Manwant Kumar instead of Samir Rizvi. So if he bats at 8.
So you could play around with Rizvi and Ashutosh and have one of those 2. And your second player is potentially someone
like
who played
bat and bowl.
Who played Rasik Dar's role in the past, or the all-rounder Lalit Yadav, who they didn't quite have the impact, but you knew why they were playing them for that extra option. Right, let's take it to the boys online. Tom, your thoughts breaking Delhi down?
Yeah, I think they've had a pretty good auction. My only concerns with this team, or this 12 that's up on screen, is there's a lot of promise in that batting, but not sort of proven players over a long period of time. Yes, we've seen a flash of what Fraser McGurk can do, but he's gone quiet since that little cameo in the back half of the season with Delhi. He hasn't done much outside of that in other franchise cricket or for Australia. I like Perel. He looks like a good player, but it's a huge role that he's playing at number 3. Harry Brook, we know that, yes, he's got a huge amount of talent, but didn't quite grab his first IPL opportunity. Stubbs, again, has caught fire. So he's, ticked that sort of finisher's role. We know that what his qualities are. And my other concern with this setup is really the lack of depth of bowling options if a few things do go wrong.
Yep. Okay, we can bring up the overall squad as well if you want to have a look at the potential reserves for Delhi Capitals. There you go. There's Chamira, who himself has had challenges with fitness when it comes to the IPL and even for Sri Lanka. Mohit Sharma is there too, someone who didn't make up playing 12, but you may see him more often than we can account for at this stage. But yeah, Matt, you can take it forward. Talk about perhaps Harry Brook and whether he's likely to be a regular there. We haven't seen him, of course, because of personal reasons last time, but we think he can play a big role in this team. And there's also Faf du Plessis, curiously.
Yeah, I really like the investment in the 3 young overseas batters there. I think Fraser McGurk, Brook and Stubbs, they're all 25 or younger and could sort of be the core of that team for years to come. I suppose with Delhi, they had such an extreme venue last time, didn't they, in the Kotla, in that the runs that were scored there were pretty much unmatched across the competition, or at least were at the top end. And I guess the question then with the attack is, how are you going to take the wickets to stop other teams when they'll all turn up at Delhi and think this is a chance to pile on 220, 240, 250. I guess Stark and Kuldeep are therefore going to play massive roles as the main wicket takers. But yeah, I think the potential lack of a 6th bowling option in that 12 is a bit of a concern. Stubbs as the 6th bowler, not ideal. And the other question that we've not spoken about with Delhi is which version of KL Rahul we'll see over the course of that season, because at his best he can be not only a consistent run scorer but a destructive player as well. But it's a question of whether the potential captaincy is going to unlock that for him, and whether playing at a venue like Delhi will bring out the best version of KL Rahul that we haven't always seen in IPL recently.
Yeah, I mean, Sriram has made the point that Manwant Kumar, a 20-year-old seam bowling all-rounder, left-hander, can hit it and bowls. He could add value in place of one of Ashutosh or Samir Rizvi. We think Ashutosh might get the nod ahead of Samir Rizvi to start. But yeah, KL Rahul, I can only tell you, Matt, I'm pretty sure he's going to strike at 200 at least 2 games next season against the same opposition. One of the games will be at Lucknow. Not sure about the other, but we'll come to that later. Let's just address the question of Rahul as captain as well. Rahul as captain, does the panel agree unanimously? Nagaraj had told us they were also going to consider Akshar Patel, looking at how the auction played out. But now that they have a screaming option in the form of KL?
Yeah, I mean, that seems pretty obvious.
Oh, Dustin, come on. All right.
Unless they make Faf captain.
Unless they make Faf captain. Well, he's got to find his way into the team for that reason. Tom, that's an interesting one, though. I mean, you can't always rule out Faf as an option if the situation demands it.
Yeah, I think KL Rahul captain.
Okay. And Matt, you can start off with a rating for Delhi Capitals and confirm if Rahul's going to be captain there as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure KL will be captain, and I'll rate it maybe a 7.
Okay, 7 for Matt Roller. Tom Moody?
7.5 for me.
Sriram?
7.5.
Dustin?
7.
7. I'm going to give them an 8. Just, for a first-time assembled coaching staff there. And I'm sure it's always interesting when you have 2 sets of owners and there are plenty of chefs over there on that table at Delhi Capitals often. Saurav Ganguly was always there, but Venugopal Rao, Hemang Badani, I think they've done a pretty good job. If fitness is kind to them for their key players, I like teams that have good bowling lineups, and I think Delhi certainly is one of them. Thank you for sending those questions across. We're going to be using those as we speak of those teams, so keep them coming, guys. Let's move to our next team, shall we? Wrapped up with 4 Lucknow Super Giants. Right after Delhi comes Lucknow. This is just mischievous from our production. So KL's former team is done. Now it's Pant's former team, present team in action. Rishabh Pant in that team at 27 crore, record making. And they didn't want to stop with their left-handed hitters. David Miller to add to Pant and Puran, who they retained. Aiden Markram and Mitch Marsh were picked up on day one at what we could say, low price buys. But now, as things unfold and the dust settles, Markram and Marsh are actually two of just 6 overseas players that they've gone with. And out of those 6 players, one of them is Matthew Bretsky, we've not seen too much of in the IPL, and Shama Joseph, who we've also not seen too much of and is quite unproven. So if you have to play 4 overseas, suddenly Marsh and Markram are mainstays. Avesh Khan back at Lucknow, Samad there as well, along with Shahbaz Ahmed. They might have a role to play. Manimaran Siddharth, who's familiar with the team. Arshin Kulkarni was there last year as well. Other than that, I think the big lifting was done yesterday when Pant was picked up. However, as we put the best 12 together, along with Bishnoi, Mayank Yadav, some really top players, yeah, Akashdeep was big money, but we think he's cover for Mayank Yadav, given the concerns around his injury. Mohsen is there. Again, he has his track record of injury, but that seems to be improving. Bishnoi, Avesh Khan as the bowling contingent, along with Shahbaz Ahmed and Abdul Samad, and left of screen. We actually think Pant might open here to break up the right-handers. So Marsh, Pant, Markram and Puran as your top 4. Badoni, who bats quite high when he plays domestic T20 cricket, and also batted higher for the emerging team in Oman recently when he was part of that. And Miller in a familiar role and position. I think we're going to have some very interesting opinions coming through. Let's ask Sriram, who was with the Lucknow team not recently and till recently, and what you make of what that overall team and the potential 12
Four
looks
overseas batters is what I make. No overseas bowler. It's very, very surprising. At 11, I've not seen any team go with a consistent plan of having 4 overseas batters and no overseas bowlers.
I don't want to cast a spell on them, but Mohsen and Mayank Yadav have fitness concerns. It's always a case, which makes it even more concerning about their lack of overseas bowlers.
Their overseas contingent as a whole leaves a few questions, I think, because even the batters they've gone for, Marsh, Markram, Miller, don't have the best of recent IPL form. Miller, of course, has a good past in the IPL, but didn't have a great season last time around. And then Marsh and Markram haven't kind of caught fire in the IPL yet. They've had a few performances here and there, but not been consistent. So, yeah, the overseas contingent is clearly kind of the question mark there. I think the thing is that they just spend so much on Pant that they didn't have the money to then go splurge on the overseas players. They also spent quite a bit on the Indian bowlers, though. And even today was bidding high for a lot of the Indian bowlers.
So, Mitch Marsh has not even lasted a full IPL for whatever reasons. It's always been a concern with Delhi and even some of his previous franchises. So, yeah, Tom, take it away with the Lucknow Super Giants.
Yeah, it's a little bit puzzling, this one. Very short on bowling and depth of bowling. The local bowlers that they have, the Indian bowlers they have, are injury prone. So, yes, if they're fit and firing, they're good options to have. But it does concern me that the lack of depth and experience they've got in their bowling unit. The question mark around at the end of a mega auction, you're still unsure what your real, your opening combination looks like. You'd think that is an absolute, lock, something you'd know for sure. But, the way we're looking at it, you've put in this particular team Punt at in that opening position. I can't see that happening personally. I think Marsh will probably open. And I think they just pulled the trigger too early on Miller. I like Miller as a player. He was, a great servant for GT over 3 years and had some good form. But, given that they've got Nicholas Puran and they got Punt early in the auction, I just felt that was a early shot that was fired that didn't need to be shot, fired off. We saw, other teams be a little bit more patient with some of those overseas players and pick them up at base price or just a tick over base price. So, I think that from a strategy point of view, there's a few misses there and there's certainly a few holes.
Yeah, if you just put Miller, Marsh and Markram together, that's about 13 crore, which doesn't sound a lot at this auction, but they could have had a little more coming into day 2. And we saw teams like MI and RCB at least have more holes filled, which we'll come to in a little while. Matt, you can carry on that, whether Pant is a likely opener, whether Marsh is, your first choice and Markram is your first choice as well. Do you share the same skepticism about the team that the rest of the panel do?
Yeah, I don't think this squad makes much sense to me at all, really. If I think about Lucknow as a venue and how you win there, if you think of those black soil, slow and low pitches that quite often get served up there, I'd be thinking I want to invest in some finger spin, whereas I don't see a lot of that at all, really, in this Lucknow squad. And I really can't see that that's a bowling attack that's capable of winning an IPL. I hope I'm proved wrong, because I think it'll be good fun if they do compete. You think of the prospect of Pant and Pooran taking down the spinners together in the middle overs. That could be a pretty extraordinary thing to watch. But it looks like a pretty baffling squad to me, and I find it quite hard to believe they'll be in contention for the playoffs.
Interesting, and I think that what I'll throw in there is we of course have put Pant as captain, which we almost think is a certainty unless they go Pooran, because there has been enough air around about why Delhi didn't agree to keep Pant back, and we think it was down to not guaranteeing leadership. And there are enough questions still remain to be answered on Pant, the captain. So would you free him up and perhaps look at name Pooran captain, who was captain of the West Indies, or was Pant going nowhere from the captaincy after that extraordinary?
I think he won the captaincy, and I think they'd give it to him.
Well, if I'm paying someone 27 crore, they'll do what I tell them to. No one's asking for anything more. But and that, I think the other thing is, I think we brought this up, Pant the batter is still yet to take the IPL by storm in recent years.
In recent years, yeah. I mean, he's had some very good seasons, but those were more 4 to 5 years ago. In recent times, it's been the strike rate that hasn't been always. He tends to be a little bit slow early in his innings, right? I think if you look at his first 10 ball strike rate, it's not the fastest, which maybe then the question is, but maybe him being opener, maybe that's why you and I thought of that as a solution, that you put him up there so that he can take a little bit more time and then get going through the power play.
Yeah, I mean, the Indian team used him in the top 3 in the World Cup for a reason, as a disruptor, and also to break up right-handers with Rohit and Virat at the top. So I can only assume that if they want to disrupt those, the same thing, that could be something they do, because they have Pooran and Miller. And I think if Pant was the plan and Miller was brought, then and Pooran was already there, then I think Pant, Pooran and Miller is too much in the middle. Therefore, I think Pant will go higher. Will he go as high as opening? We'll find out. I'm getting some nice comments, though. This is a bit mean, but Abdullah says Lucknow look like the new RCB. Jayan says LSG don't have any bowler who can swing the new ball. And there's another one over here saying, can Zach bowl? Yeah, I'm not sure that's what he's supposed to do.
But I will say, though, that I think Avesh Khan is a really good buy for LSG.
Yeah.
I think at 9.75, they were doing well when they got him, but then it was just that they had spent so much on Pant and him, and already Pooran at 18, that they just didn't have enough purse left after that.
They traded him for 10 crore and they've got him back for 9.75.
Yeah, I somehow feel like batting may not be a problem. There's just plenty over there, and they are relying heavily on Mayank Yadav's fitness as someone who's been retained for 11 crore. They have Akashdeep as cover, but Akashdeep's body of work in T20 cricket is not as strong as it is in Test cricket. Right, let's take a rating, shall we? Everything that we've said so far. Tom Moody, your rating out of 10?
5 for me.
Matt?
5 also.
I thought I said Matt. I was going to say Matthew and Matt. I said Matt. The Matt says 5 apiece so far. Sriram?
6.
6. Dustin?
I'll say just because of Avesh Khan, 6.
You're an Avesh Khan fan.
He was one of my pre-auction picks. That's why I'm just bigging him up.
I'm just going to say that I'll give them a 6 just to give more teams benefit of doubt after big auctions, because sometimes it plays out so differently. But if Mayank Yadav isn't fit, that goes down by at least 2 points, which is quite low. But anyway, there you have it, 5s and 6s, which is slightly less than the mean so far from the panel to the Lucknow Super Giants. But we wish them well, and let's see how they shape up under Rishabh Pant. And Tom, yes, you agree too. Pant as captain. Give me a thumbs up for that one. That's a big thumb. Okay, let's go. Let's move forward, shall we? Let's take the next one. Next team coming up, Kolkata Knight Riders. Right, this will be fun. I'm already seeing a lot of comments coming up. Next, Arya wanted KKR next. We're giving him to you. And there are questions on whether they've had the worst auction already. So let's see if the panel goes that way. Defending champions paid 23 plus for Venki Iyer. We might think he might actually captain here. Quinton de Kock and Gurbaz are the 2 keepers. Nokia and Spencer Johnson are the 2 overseas quicks. Moeen Ali picked up late in the day. Rovman Powell, you think potentially cover for their big boys who they've retained, Sunil Narayan and Andre Russell. And you also have Umran Malik as a late addition, as well as Ajinkya Rahane. You know, to be honest, towards the last hour or so of the auction, when we had to build KKR's best team, we were really struggling for the balance, and we could only find it if Manish Pandey was playing in the 12. Now, Ajinkya Rahane has come in, but if you play Rahane, then you're playing Venki Iyer, who we've actually christened as captain, and he gave some comments to Geo Cinema yesterday, speaking about how he's up for a leadership role, and he was the vice captain with Nitish Rana out most of last season. We've gone for De Kock ahead of Gurbaz, though I had to fight Dustin tooth and nail for it, and that is the team that we've gone for. The bowling still looks strong with Varun Chakravarti, Sunil Narayan, thrown in Vaibhav Arora there, Harshit Rana, Ramandeep stocks are rising as an Indian all-rounder, and Rinku Singh was their top retention. Let's get a reaction. Tom, break this one down for us.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a puzzling one for me. There's some of it I like. Obviously, they've got some season match winners there that they retained in Narayan and Russell and Rinku Singh. I can't get my head around the Venki Iyer price that was paid. Even if he's going to be anointed captain or not, I just don't think he provides that value. It's going to be very interesting to see how this group goes. Quinton de Kock, after I think they already had Gurbaz before Quinton de Kock, if I'm correct in saying that.
I think they got Gurbaz after.
I think it was the other way around, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I just didn't think they needed both of them. To be honest with you, particularly someone like Quinton de Kock, who's a seasoned player, he's always going to get first nod. They could have probably gone for a local keeper and looked at another option on the overseas bench.
Matt?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think some of the backups actually were quite good. I thought they recovered quite well today, having had not a great start or having just sort of put themselves in a corner, I suppose, more to the point with that Venkatesh Iyer bidding war with RCB. I think it doesn't look as strong as last year, does it, on paper? And I suppose the big question really, it dates back to their retentions, which is around Narayan and Russell, who had great years last year, but are 36 and look like key players for them in this cycle, and whether or not they'll still be able to do it in the sort of twilight of their career heading into their late 30s, because if those two can replicate the impact that they've had for the franchise over their time with them, as they head towards the ends of their careers, then they'll be a formidable side. If not, you suddenly start looking through and thinking that it could be a bit concerning. And I'm struggling I wanted to have a stronger answer to say that Manish Pandey shouldn't be in there, but it's not obvious who the replacement is. As you say, maybe it's Rahane, maybe it's Anakul Roy, someone like that, but it does look like a slightly harder spot to fill than you might expect, given the balance that Narayan and Russell should give you.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against Manish Pandey. Due respect to him, and he's had his time, and maybe he will have a second coming of sorts at KKR, where he did enjoy his early years in the IPL. But we think players like that at this stage are part of the squad more so, and not necessarily starters. So when we were trying to put Manish Pandey in the 11, and they didn't really see a viable option, it's not even like they've got plenty of domestic players who might surprise us. We know pretty much what Anukul Roy brings. Ran is there, Lavneet Sisodia, so unless they're going...
They've only got 13 Indian players, because they've got 21 players and 8 overseas.
Thin squad. Thin squad again. Sriram?
Yeah, I think I've said this yesterday as well. They underestimated the value of Shreyas Iyer and Mitchell Stark in that campaign, trophy-winning campaign. So in going for their core, so-called core, I think they missed out on two very important elements, that your strike bowler and your captain. So Venki Iyer is a very much an unknown commodity, assuming that he's going to captain, or even if it's Rinku Singh. I think captain plays a huge role in the IPL, handling and marshalling your resources on the ground. So it's going to be very untested on that front.
Yeah, I'm not as down on KKR's auction as everyone else seems to be, just because I think that, yes, I know it looks a little odd when you have a player like Manish Pandey who's been around so long in the first 12, but then if you look at the players around him, I mean, there's Ramandeep, Rinku, Andre Russell, they are good finishers. So you would hope that you maybe even don't need, that player to bat too many balls.
Yeah, they may not name that player in 11.
Exactly, or you can just play an extra bowler, and they do have some decent bowling options. And, Venkatesh Iyer, I know the price seemed like, I mean, it went way above what everybody expected, but he is, I think, only one of 7 Indian batters to be striking above 150 and averaging above 30 in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So he's actually been pretty good, just as a batter at least. And you have retained most of the squad that won the title last time. Of course, you're missing Shreyas and Stark, which are key members, but at least you've got Weber Varora back. Him and Harshit Rana are quite exciting because they're both two fast bowlers you expect to be improving at this stage.
You know, I actually slept with the thought of Venki Iyer and woke up with a slightly more considerate position for KKR. And I'm going to throw this to Tom because I'm sure he wants to have a stab at me here. And I can see some comments coming through as well that Venki Iyer actually has won his IPL side more games in the last 2 or 3 years than even Shreyas or Rishabh Pant. So if he is being paid in the 20 to 24 crore bracket, he's been more of a match winner. He's literally won games of his own bat. Potentially an all-rounder. And yeah, if he is a captaincy option, is it really that much, Tom? And he's still going to say yeah. I just know he's going to say yes.
Do I need to answer that? I hear what you're saying, and it's a good point you make because there are some memorable innings that Venki Iyer has played that have been match winning, and ultimately you're wanting your big players, your highly paid players to be able to win matches for you, and he's certainly done that. Whether he's done that more than others, I'd have to do some digging and research to give you that answer. But I still feel that above 18 is way overshot. My biggest criticism is that why they didn't work something out before the auction around retention if they saw him as such a valuable match winner and a potential captain. I would have been locking that person down before the auction.
And the other name I really missed out was Phil Salt. That's a name that was critical to their
and is Quinton de Kock still that player?
Exactly. I think they definitely wanted Salt, but they just went so high for Venki Iyer that's who they then missed out on because they had paid so much for Venki Iyer.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We did discuss this at the end of the day yesterday too, and whether they too were shocked at what happened with Venki Iyer.
Yeah.
And which was the other team? Remind me, Dustin. RCB, who kept going for him. So
I think RCB was shell shocked the first part of the auction, and then they shocked KKR.
Yeah, I wonder what happens if KKR pull out 1 or 2 bids and then RCB get it for 22. It's just a different world. But yeah, KKR. I think it's important how they start. There's some questions coming in on captaincy. Now we put Venki there. There's one question I just saw a little while back saying, put Rahane in the team and make him captain. I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think that'll happen. But anyway, let's go to ratings now. We've said what we have to, and you never know. Again, there is at least 80-90% of the winning squad from last year, even though key members are missing, most notably Shreyas Iyer, Mitch Stark, and Phil Salt. But Tom Moody, all things considered, your rating?
6.5 for me.
Okay. Matt?
I'll give them a 7.
You know what? After all the considerations, it seems like there's a slightly more generous rating for them than some of the other teams. Sriram?
6.5.
Sriram, 6.5 as well. I think 60% is a pretty good score with the way we're going so far.
But I think we're also giving them that because their retentions are so strong. But based just purely on the auction, maybe a 6.
Man, this is going to come down to whether Russell and Narayan are Russell and Narayan of last
But they weren't buys in the auction. They were retentions.
Yes,
so we're rating the auction performance.
But I think last year they did well to cover for them too. Okay. And they weren't as dependent on them. I mean, so much of their batting wasn't even asked to come in last year. But they had strong batting that wasn't utilised. Shreyas and Rinku in particular. That's because Narayan had a great season. But they were ready for a bad season with Narayan. I don't know if they're ready this year. Nitish Rana too, not there. I'm not sure if they're ready for a soft season of Narayan with de Kock at the top and not Salt. And the same with Nokia and not Stark in a big game, a crunch game. So I'm concerned, so I'm going to give them a 5.5. Sorry, Venki, Mysore, I know you're watching, sir, but yeah, please prove me wrong. Many teams have. I talk nonsense anyway. Let's go to the next team, shall we? Mumbai Indians. This was a fascinating team to observe, simply because it seemed like they were quiet on day one. In fact, they decided to keep it late in the chase and then pick up a number of players towards the afternoon and evening of day 2. What are the big stories here? Trent Bolt returns to the Mumbai Indians at 12.5 crores. A big tussle with Jofra Archer with Rajasthan, then Trent Bolt with Rajasthan, and they split Archer and Bolt one apiece. So Bolt is there, and big money today paid for Deepak Chahar. So you see a lot of investment going into their power play bowlers to free up Jasprit Bumrah, something the panel observed earlier in the day when the Chahar bid took place. Reece Topley, who is highly rated as a T20 player. Unfortunately, injuries have cut short his impact in the IPL. But Topley's there too. Santner and Allah Ghazanfar as two highly rated overseas spinners. Ryan Rickleton, who plays for MI Cape Town, could be an option with Rohit Sharma at the top of the order. But I think Akash Ambani, in fact, said at one of the interviews at the auction that Robin Minge is going to start and he's going to be part of their 12. Whether he's an opener or whether that goes to someone else, we'll find out. They have such a strong Indian core that they could go without 4 overseas. But if they want to play Will Jacks, we know what he's capable of from the short glimpse we got last season. Some surprise names in Bevin Jacobs and Lizard Williams towards the end. Vignesh Puttur, Sriram, you remember him?
Yeah,
the left-arm wrist spinner.
Yeah,
left-arm wrist spinner from the Kerala League. So they've had his eyes on him. Arjun Tendulkar finds a familiar home as well. I think that was right towards the end of the auction. Raj Baba as well over there. Right, let's break this down. Karan Sharma as a spinner, option 2. And Namandir is someone they paid the RTM for. Sriram.
Yeah, I think they had a very clear auction strategy because they knew on day one they're not going to fight getting a Rishabh Pant or even a high quality fast bowler like a Stark. They went for Rabada, but
they also were in it for Stark early on, but pulled out quickly.
They knew that they were not going, so they were very quiet and they had retained the core and they come into the auction only with 45. And so they waited for the other teams to come even with them, and then they knew their targets pretty well and they too.
But they did miss out on the opener keeper that they wanted because they went for both QDK and Ishan Kishan and didn't get either.
But once again, they withdrew those bids. It's not like both those players went for insane amounts. Kishan 11, QDK I think less. But they just chose not to get those players.
I know, but I'm just saying that clearly those were players that they wanted, that they didn't end up getting because other teams outbid them. And they've ended up with now the opening slot is still a question, right? You're saying maybe it's going to be Robin Minns, it may be
Ryan Rickleton.
It might be Ryan Rickleton, it might be Will Jacks.
Yeah.
So that's one slot where it's not exactly nailed down. That's the only spot where I think they didn't get their first priorities.
That's very interesting. I mean, I just think of it as the Mumbai have been fixated on certain players and won them back because they like that familiarity. And this time they were a lot more ruthless about it. They were willing to put a sharp price point on Ishan, on Quinton de Kock.
They didn't even raise a paddle for Krunal Pandya. That was the most.
100%. That was quite surprising and quite telling. And they also withdrew the Stark bid, but they ended up buying Bolt for more than what Stark went for. Which again could just be the dynamics of the auction. Rajasthan were more keen to spend on day 2, or it was the end of day 1 than earlier on. Now let's get Tom and Matt to break this down. I'm very curious with the overseas players how they play it out. So Matt, you can go first, especially when you got someone like Will Jacks in that team and Ryan Rickleton too. How do they look, the Mumbai Indians?
Yeah, well, I think as they often do, I think Mumbai have taken the Indians part of their name very literally. I think of their 8 biggest buys, there's only one overseas player in Trent Bolt, and that was always going to be the case because of the retentions that they made. But I wouldn't be at all surprised to see them continue to do what they've occasionally done in the past couple of years and go into games with either 2 or 3 overseas starters and then a handful of overseas options on the bench. I think Ghazanfar is an interesting pickup. I think he's very highly rated among the sort of T20 world. I think he took a 6 for the other week in an ODI for Afghanistan and is sort of seemingly the next guy on their spin bowling production line, which is obviously pretty storied already. But yeah, and I think you're spot on to identify that the new ball bowling is somewhere where they've really heavily invested because you'd immediately think Bolt and Bumrah would resume that partnership, but then Deepak Chahar is obviously going to bowl a lot in the power play as well. So between those 3 seam bowlers bowling 6 overs up top, I think more often than not, opposition teams will be 2 or 3 down early on, and it's almost then a question when you're at somewhere like Wankhede whether you're brave enough to attack and keep going after that score that you often need to win there. So I think it does look a strong side, but it is slightly curious to see a side so heavily weighted towards local domestic players rather than overseas because, as you say, you end up with a bit of a fudge. I'd be surprised, for example, if Jacks ends up at number 5.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big one over there amongst a few others. Tom, Will Jacks, ideally you want him to open, but they've got just players like Tilak and Surya waiting to come in 3-4. You almost seem like it's a crime if you push them down the order. Where do you sense their challenges lie and what's your overall assessment of their auction?
I think it was really intriguing to watch Mumbai because I saw a completely different Mumbai at this auction that we've seen in previous auctions. We've seen them being quite bullish and, really wanting to have a piece of, most of the big names early on in auctions. I thought they were quite reserved and conservative and measured with their approach. I think they've done very well with the recruitments. Trent Bolt, is an absolute, not a steal, but, an important bowler, particularly given the home venue where he does swing it and he's had success there before. I really like Santner also as an alternative spin option. I think he's has been underutilised in the IPL. I think he's a very useful defensive bowler, which is what you're going to need at one caddy. Jax, to me, if he plays, he has to open. Otherwise, there's too many other options that they've got in the middle order. I can't see Hardik Pandya batting 7. He'll be sort of probably where Jax is at 5. So, yeah, they've got most bases covered. And, their squad as an entirety, I think, looks so far better than it was and it has been for the last 3 years.
Yep, certainly you could see that. You could sense the optimism. I also noticed that there are quite a few CSK boys now that are going to play for MI. It was always a nice rivalry. Mitch Santner, Deepak Chahar find their way over here, and we'll see how that goes. Right, time for an overall assessment of the Mumbai Indians, who we know, of course, will be led by Hardik Pandya, which was announced right after the retentions. Just those retentions make the team so strong. Doesn't matter what the rest of the questions are. Let's get ratings. Sriram.
8.
8 from Sridhar and Sriram. Dustin?
Yeah, I would also say 8.
Tom?
8.5.
Very good, 8.5. Matt?
I'll go 7.5.
Okay. What did I give CSK? Let me check. Give them 8.5. 8.5 for MI as well. No one comes to my house tomorrow. Yeah. All right, let's go to our next team, shall we? But well done, Mumbai Indians. It looks like you've had a pretty solid auction. RCB are up next, folks. Please send your questions and comments. I'll try and take them at the end once we're done with the teams. Now, RCB, this was a very interesting side with the way they approached things. We thought with the second highest purse entering the auction, which they did, that they'd get one of the big boys, either a Rishabh Pant or a KL Rahul. That didn't happen. But they did pay big money for Phil Salt and Jitesh Sharma, who presumably will fill the gaps left now by Faf du Plessis and Dinesh Karthik. Liam Livingston, potentially for Glenn Maxwell's role. Josh Hazelwood, as someone that they have been fond of having in the past, but who hasn't quite had a lot of game time at the Chinnaswamy T20 cricket. Rasik Dar, they put a pretty significant bid for him in a revised RTM and took him away from KKR. And just as we look at the rest of that team, I think Rasik Dar was KKR, wasn't he not last year? Was he Delhi? Delhi, sorry, yeah. And just looking at the rest of that, Suyash Sharma is the only spinner. They went for Chahal initially and pulled out. Swapnil Singh on RTM. Tim David, who moves from MI. Romario Shepherd, who moves from MI. Nuwan Tushara, who moves from MI. So there's a bit of a theme over there too. And they've picked up some local talent towards the end, including Devdutt Padikkal, who didn't get an auction or a bid on day one of the auction, and Manoj Bhandage as well, who had a good T20 tournament in the Karnataka League. Let's break this one down. Matt, I know you have the greatest and freshest intel from that RCB table, so why don't you start with this one?
Well, I saw an interesting quote actually from Mo Bobat last night where he was sort of explaining some of the decision making that RCB had made, where he said, let's be honest, we've never won the IPL and they've always basically gone with the strategy of spending a lot on a small number of players. And he said that it was their target this year was to try and have a more balanced squad with a bit more depth. And you can see that probably by the fact that I think Hazelwood is the second biggest salary in that squad behind Kohli, and he's only on 12.5 crore, which if you compare it to pretty much every other team, I think is an unusually low salary for your second highest paid player. I think the one thing that sort of stood out for me for RCB was that they were clearly trying quite hard to get a left-handed batter in the top order. If you think they bid up to about 11 or 12 crore, I think, on Pant. They didn't initially go for Padikkal and got him back pretty late, having also missed out on what Nitish Rana they went for and didn't get. And Venkatesh Iyer, obviously, they bid very aggressively for. So I would think that they would probably be disappointed not to have a sort of more powerful, maybe left-handed top order bat, a domestic player in there. But I think overall, I mean, the potential 11 of powerful batting of overseas players of Salt, David and Livingston all in there, it looks good. As always, I suppose the question is, are they going to take enough wickets? And with Hazelwood and Bhuvneshwar Kumar with the new ball, I guess that looks like a pretty potent new ball pairing.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting point. I looked at the squad overall now, and yes, normally RCB has splurged a lot of cash on 3 or 4 players, and then you'll have a lot of guys who come in at base price, and you're hoping they also fill in the rest of the pieces. But here, Matt's spot on. You've got 21 for Kohli, and everyone else among their high-profile players is between 8 and 12. So
Lucky they didn't get Venki Iyer for 22.
yeah, they did. They were ready to get Venki to 22. It didn't happen.
So
but yeah, it's all contextual, these things.
Their strategy kind of, they took a break from their strategy for that bit of not going too high for a single.
I think Mo's sharp enough to come up with just the right answer at the end of the day. That's good old Mo Bobat for you. Let's bring in the playing 12 and put it in perspective. Then you can have perhaps a more clear idea. This is our potential 12. Kohli and Salt at the top is a very exciting prospect, but you could see why they wanted the lefty. Liam Livingston, I believe Andy Flower said yesterday at the auction, is going to bat 3. And Rajat Patidar at 4. We know Patidar is a spin hitter and takes them down, as does Livingston. Krunal Pandya picked up at 5.75 crore today. Jitesh Sharma, who could play the role of Dinesh Karthik and might even take the gloves ahead of Salt. They have 2 options there, 2 genuine options. Tim David, we put him in our first team. And there's Rasik Dar, Bhuvaneshwar Kumar picked up at big money, thrilled for Bhuvi. And Josh Hazelwood also at 12.5 crore. Yash Dayal a retention. And they can play around with their spin options. We know that the Chinnaswamy often screams for a spinner with some heart. So Yash Sharma as a leggy, Swapnil Singh, who was part of the squad last year, as a left-arm spinner. And they have the likes of Tushara, Jacob Bethel, and Devdutt Padikkal all on the bench. Tom Moody, your thoughts?
I think RCB have recovered well. I was concerned after day one to where they were going, what their philosophy was, strategy was. But they've recovered well. Now they've got some sort of balance in their side. They've gotten some potency, with the new ball. They've got a couple of defensive options with also the ball. There's never been a question about RCB's batting, and they've always been strong with their batting. And looking at that lineup, that top 7, it does look quite formidable with Tim David sort of locked in at number 7. So, yeah, I think they've recovered well, and it'll be very interesting to see how they sort of approach. What sort of brand of cricket they're going to play, because we saw 2 different brands in last season. We saw the first half of the season where they were quite pedestrian with regards to the way they went about their batting, and then the second half of the season it was the polar opposite. They really took the game on and nearly took on the philosophy that Sunrisers had, and had that great run where they just missed out on finals.
All right, there's an interesting one coming in from Manu on our comment saying you could even play around with Tim David and Tushara on the impact bench and go that way. If you need the depth of batting, then Tim David can come in, or otherwise Tushara can come in. So you could play around in that sense too and strengthen your bowling looking at situations. But yeah, Sriram.
I think they rely on new ball wickets. If a team comes through the first 6 overs unscathed, there's no wicket-taking options in the middle overs. Yeah. And that's something that's hurt RCB big time. Yeah. And then you're forced to bring back Bhuvi early, you're forced to bring back Hazelwood, and then that sort of creates a hole at the back end of the innings. So they rely on breaking the opening partnership and getting them 2 down, 3 down in the first 6. If a team comes through unscathed, 45 for no loss, you usually double your score at Chinnaswamy, where you are at the 12th over.
Yeah, I mean, they're lacking that attacking spinner again. They went for Chahal, didn't get him, but then they didn't really bid for any of the other spinners. There was Tikshana, Hasaranga, Zampa. They didn't even put in a bid for, I think, any of these players. So that was probably the one slightly confusing part of their strategy, that having gone for Chahal and tried to get him, did they not think that there was anybody else worth bidding for? Because now the spin attack is basically just Swapnil Singh, it looks like, and maybe Krunal Pandya.
Suyash Sharma and Krunal Pandya.
Yeah, but they don't have that elite, wicket-taking spinner really. And again, in terms of the bowling, I do think that, again, it's lacking a little bit of pace, because Bhuvi and Hazelwood are very good with the new ball. But do you have that bowler who can bowl with real pace through the middle overs, bowl Yorkers at the death? Considering how much they spent on Hazelwood and Bhuvi, I do think that there are duos of bowlers that you can find at other teams that maybe are a bit more versatile.
I think the challenge will be for players like Rasik Dar to bring his skills to the Chinnaswamy. I think he's a player on the rise and he's bowling tough overs even when he played for franchises previously. And India are also asking him to bowl tough overs. I know he's highly rated by even the national selectors. And this is a player that you could see why they wanted him suddenly 2. They made it 6 in the
But
bid.
he's not an express pace bowler.
He's not, but he's clever.
An accurate bowler.
He's clever. And Yash Dayal will grow into it. So I think they're banking a lot on their bowlers to come up with the skills. And a number of fast bowlers. I think Alzari was the wrong kind of bowler for Chinnaswamy last year.
But they didn't. I mean, I was also. I would be interested to get Tom's take that they didn't RTM Siraj either. They didn't even raise the RTM card, and they went for 12.5 in the end for Hazelwood. Whereas Siraj, actually, if you look at his numbers, even last season had given them very good overs in the death.
They clearly went with a lot of RTMs and didn't want either Jacks or Siraj. I think even Jacks. We should remember how Akash Ambani went and walked in and thanked the RCB management, which was a very unique gesture. But Tom, maybe just an opinion on that, on why they perhaps let go of some of their key players when they had the chance and the pulse to RTM?
Yeah, it would have made sense to right to match Mohammad Siraj. I would have thought, he's been part of the fabric there. He sort of has bowled at that venue on multiple occasions. He knows, how to get it right, and he also knows exactly where it goes wrong. He's had a good relationship with Kohli as well over that period of time. So I was surprised that he wasn't brought back into the fold. And what was the other part to your question? Sorry, Raunak?
Yeah, whether Jacks as well. I mean, they just didn't seem like they would retain familiar players.
I think Jacks. Basically, his position was compromised when they got Phil Salt, because they both play the same role at the top of the order.
Okay, simple as that. Let's get ratings. Livingston as well, and they also had David by then. So I think they.
I think that was more understandable, but early on they didn't seem to want to use the RTM for pretty much anybody. So.
Okay, there you have it. Excuse me. Let's get ratings. Sriram.
7.
Dustin.
6.5.
Tom.
6.5 for me.
Okay. Matt?
I'll go 7.
I think they actually recovered reasonably well. So for my good friend Andy Flower, I'm going to give him 7.5.
Oh, wow.
Right. Just because you want to give the bowlers something. Don't tell the bowlers that, oh God, here we go again. Right. And yes, the question of captaincy remains. They said they perhaps will allow for everything to settle from the auction and then decide who the best candidate for captain is. And at 3-2-1, we can all shout his name. Ready? The captain of RCB, 3-2-1 will be
Krunal Pandya.
Kohli Sholi.
I mean,
Yeah, midway through the last season, it was
Kohli. Tom, Kohli.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Kohli, looking at the squad they've assembled.
Matt.
Yeah, who else? I think it's nailed on.
Okay, there you have it. Kohli to perhaps captain. Oh, Kohli to captain. RCB. And I think we've got one more team. Let's go there. 2 more teams, rather. Yeah. Rajasthan Royals. Okay, this is going to be interesting because from the time we started this live, questions coming through on whether Rajasthan have potentially had a not so good auction. And I can tell you, not so good are just my words. So let's look at the team. Really strong Indian core retained. Sanju Samson, Jaiswal, Parag, Jurel, Sandeep Sharma as an uncapped. And Hetmeyer, which we were surprised with how late that decision was reached at from all the intel Nagaraj Kolhapuri gathered. Big signings, Jofra Archer, 12.5 crore. Mentioned that tussle with MI. Curiously, both Sri Lankan spinners that have had IPL game time and have reputation, Thikshana and Hasaranga, they managed to invest on Indian seamers today. So they got, and yesterday, they got Akash Madwal, Tushar Deshpande, they picked up Shubham Dubey, who was part of the squad last time too, Yudhvir Charak, who's promising bowler. They paid some decent money for Quena Mapaka towards the end, and they only have filled up 6 of the 8 overseas slots. One of those players is Mapaka, who is, of course, an uncapped international for South Africa, was player of the tournament of the Under-19 Men's World Cup earlier this year, but he had a tough outing with MI in his inaugural IPL season as a replacement player. Fazal Haq Farooqi is there as well, and Nitish Rana has been picked up by RR. So you'll find a number of those players that feature in the ideal 12. Let's go straight to that, because I think RR, you have to put the team together to truly understand whether they filled enough holes or not. We've put Samson at the top of the order, especially with the recent form he's had for India. It'll be hard moving him out. Jaiswal, Samson, Rana at 3, and Parag 4. Jurel potentially a number 5 now, along with Hetmeyer. We put Hasaranga and Jofra Archer there at 7 and 8, but Shubham Dubey could easily be in your batting 11 and Madhwal in your bowling 11, so they could play around with that. And we've got Deshpande and Sandeep Sharma. I'm very curious to hear the panel's thoughts on this. Tom, why don't you start us off?
Oh, I was hoping you weren't going to ask me first. Yeah, this one's quite puzzling, to be honest with you. 6 overseas players with 2 of them being Sri Lankan spinners. Yes, they're different types of spinners. So, are you playing them in the same side? Faruqi, I like that recruitment. I thought Faruqi was a bit of a steal at that price. I think he's a underrated bowler. He's a genuine wicket taker and he can bowl in all 3 phases of the game. I think they look light on the depth of their overseas players and the flexibility of their overseas combinations. Yes, they have recovered with some good domestic bowlers, fast bowlers, but if Archer goes down at some stage, to me they look considerably weaker side. But if Archer remains fit and is in that side permanently for 14 plus games, finals, hopefully for their case, I think they look a strong outfit.
Matt?
Yeah, I think the other thing potentially is batting depth. If you look at that projected side we've got there, I think Hasaranga looks a little, Archer in particular probably looks a spot higher at number 8, but I think what they might do is use Hasaranga as that floater in the same way they did with Ashwin over the most recent auction cycle. I think the pace bowling attack looks a little light unless they play Faruqi as well as Archer, who I agree with Moods. I think it was a steal at 2. I think that the one real saving grace for Rajasthan, having invested so heavily in that batting core, was the fact that they managed to pick up Nitish Rana for 4.2 crore, which I think is one of the bargains of this auction. I think a player of his quality and the way he complements the rest of the top 6, where they've got 3 left-handers, 3 right-handers, I think that was a really, really good bit of business that's kind of saved their auction because they didn't have a huge amount to invest in the bowling attack, and it does look probably not quite as strong as it has in previous years when they had the Ashwin-Chahal combination.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the bowling, it's nowhere near what it was last year. Bolt, Chahal, Ashwin, Avesh Khan, and that seemed like a really formidable 5. Now, it's not easy to get replacements for all those players, and they tried for Bolt, but they ended up getting Archer. Where do you stand on the RR team?
No, I think I've never seen a team that's playing 2 overseas spinners, and I think it just tells me that Rahul Dravid doesn't rate the other Indian spinners very high, apart from Chahal and Ashwin.
He doesn't rate Chahal very highly either. He sent him into the auction.
No, but he couldn't have.
At least he bid for him.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so I don't think he rated the other Indian spinners. So I think it was a on-table call to go with that strategy of 2 overseas spinners. They missed out on Prasidh Krishna and Avesh Khan, so which potentially could have boosted their bowling attack a little more, because it was a clear strategy to have an formidable Indian bowling lineup complementing the 2 Sri Lankan spinners.
Yep.
And now, like just Tom says, they're banking on Archer playing the 14 games.
Yeah, they did bid for both Prasidh and Avesh, but then just stopped short. I think because they were waiting for Archer. I think probably that order, it went against them a little bit because they seemed dead set on getting a big overseas name, either Bolt or Archer, which is why they didn't really go up, above 10 or 11 for any of the Indian seamers. But then it has left them a little bit light on Indian seam bowlers because it's basically Akash Madhwal and Tushar Deshpande, both with potential but fairly inexperienced.
Yeah, and I think also can be expensive, and Deshpande has been really good for CSK.
Yeah.
Can he be as good for RR with Sanju Samson behind the stumps and not MS?
Yeah, and again, on Matt Roller's point, similar issue with them just not having enough all-rounders, as they have had even in the past cycle, where it's tough to find an 11 where you have either you have a number 7 who doesn't really bowl, or you have a number 8 that doesn't really bat. You have an Archer at 8, or you have a Dubey at
if
7.
you put in Shubham Dubey at 7 in a batting first team, and then sub him out for an Akash Madhwal, I think you still have enough options in that team. Theekshana and Faruqi, I guess, will depend, or even Hasaranga and Faruqi. Theekshana earns his place as the first spinner. You can play around with that, looking at venues and conditions if you want the 2 overseas spinners or just the 1. But yeah, I can, unless they're trusting Rian Parag's part-time off spin,
Yeah.
I can see comments coming through which are similar. They're back to that Rovman Powell,
Exactly,
Jason
yeah,
Holder issue that they had for a while.
I mean, maybe they're expecting the LPL version of Hasaranga to come into the IPL, because I think he won about 32 awards in the LPL one season, and he was the best batter and best bowler. So maybe they're expecting that out of him in this game.
And we know Rajasthan are not a team to try these funky things, shall we say. As Matt pointed out, you could very well see a Hasaranga promoted to give it a whack up top. But yes, I can't help but think Matt's point on Nitish Rana is spot on here. You take Rana out of that and suddenly there's an imbalance, and there's also lopsidedness of left and right handers there. You've got Jaiswal, you've got Rana, and you've got Hetmeyer. It's beautifully balanced in the batting, and you can't help but think that Jaiswal and Samson and Parag after last season.
Yeah, they were unlucky to miss out on Naman Dheer, but I think Nitish Rana was a steal at 4 points.
Let's just hope they have good seasons with fitness. Nitish Rana struggled last year. Jofra Archer, big one for him. He's not going to be playing.
Hasaranga.
Yeah, Hasaranga as well. There's a lot of players you're hoping don't have any major issues. And these CBs given their go-ahead, surely, Matt, before Jofra.
Yeah, well, I can't see him turning down 12.5 crore to play for Sussex in the county championship. Can you?
Yeah. All right. Now, I think Tom called it yesterday simply. He's not going to be playing a lot of Test cricket. Let's get ratings. Tom Moody.
I'm saying 6.5.
Matt?
I'll go 7.5.
Okay.
I'm in between 7.
7 for Sridharan Sriram.
6.5.
6.5. I'll give him a 7. 7 for me for Rajasthan Royals. I think they'll be all right. And lastly, the Sunrisers Hyderabad, I think, is where we close things off. The runners-up from the IPL in 2024, and that strong overseas score along with Abhishek Sharma and Nitish Reddy retained, job done. One of the first things I'll say is that Klaasen now seems like really good business. I don't know what he would have gone for at the auction. So I think they've done well to keep him and at least take care of that part. Has it affected the rest of their squad building, though? Let's have a look. Shami and Harshal Patel at decent money. So too Ishan Kishan, curiously. Rahul Chahar and Adam Zampa as two much more experienced spinners in international and IPL cricket than they had last season. And you've got Abhinav Manohar there, who presumably plays Samad's role. Simarjeet Singh, good bowler for CSK. He could be cover for Shami with some concerns around fitness. And towards the end of the auction, they added some squad members there. It was a challenge, though. They have Kamindu Mendes and Ishan Malinga as perhaps ones to look out for the future for Sri Lanka, and Bryden Kaas as well. But when we built their 12, let's just have a look at Sunrisers' ideal 12. We were finding it hard to get the right balance. And we thought Aniket Verma is, the intelligence we gather, is a highly rated middle order bat for Hyderabad. And if you put him there, and if he's a certainty to start, then the other pieces fall into place. So you have Kishan at 3, the rest of the batting picks itself, and Abhinav Manohar, like I said, for Samad's role, Cummins the captain, Harshal and Shami, Chahar and Zampa win what we think might be a two-man leg spin or wrist spin attack, which is quite bold and creative. Let's get reactions. Sriram.
Yeah, the top 6 is pretty scary. They've got the firepower to get 200 every game. Even if 2 or 3 in that top 6 can come off, then they can. And they've managed their bowling. I would say they were a better bowling attack last year, but they've managed it. And I think that the prospect of playing 2 leggies is very interesting.
It's a good
Can
one.
I look at that again?
Yeah, let's bring it up one more time for Sriram.
I'm just wondering what their power play bowling will be, because Harshal Patel doesn't bowl power play. Zampa has to bowl. Chahar has to bowl. Shami is one. Pat Cummins is not he's not a new ball bowler. So I wonder what their power play bowling will be.
Yeah, I mean, Shami certainly is going to have a big role to play in the power play.
Can't bowl both ends.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have to find the second. We have to find the second partner for Mohammad Shami. I mean, Simarjeet is known to be a swing bowler, but whether you can fit him in there, yeah.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, a lot of teams have the strategy of spending a lot of money on their first 12 and then buying everyone else at base price. SRH's strategy was to spend a lot of money on their first 9 and then buy everybody else at base price. Because they spend a lot of money on just 8 or 9 players. Even after having, I think, spent the second most on the retentions, they then went for Ishan Kishan and Shami for about 21, which left them more or less nothing. And then they got Harshal. So they had very little to spend today. But I think considering all that, it's actually a fairly decent first 11 or 12. But yeah, backups, I think, will be the issue, right? Because they're not a lot of big name backups there, but maybe their scouting has been good and some of the younger players will provide adequate backup.
All right, Tom Moody. on SRH. And Sriram's question on their power play concerns.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. I think their bowling looks to be a little bit vulnerable. I quite like the idea of the two leg spinners in the playing 11. They're two very different leg spinners. Zampa can bowl power play, but he's a master in the middle overs, but he can offer you an over in the power play. A lot sort of is hinging on Mohammad Shami being fit and being that spearhead that Bhuvaneshwar Kumar has been for many, many years for Sunrisers. And there's no guarantee that's going to happen. So if something happens to him, I think there's going to be some serious holes in their bowling unit. There's no question they're going to have the power with the bat. They've shown that last year. They've only added to that with Ishan Kishan, which to me was a puzzling decision to spend that money on him when they could have invested that more on the bowling side and looked at a more of an economical Indian option to come in at number 3.
All right, Matt, let's take it to you and just also remind the viewers of the options that they have. There is also Bryden Cast. I don't know if he's just cover for Pat Cummins, whether he could solve some of the concerns we have on their bowling. Your thoughts?
I would imagine Cass, given he's not a new ball bowler at all, he's probably even more weighted towards the middle overs than Cummins would be. I would imagine he's just cover for him. I guess another option could be not to play Zampa and to have Kamindu Mendes in there. But personally, I think it's really exciting prospect to see Zampa play a full IPL season. I mean, he's become such a dominant performer at international level for Australia, and yet I think the most games he's ever played in a single IPL season is only about 5 or 6. So the prospect of him actually getting a full run at 14 games and us, learning whether or not he's the real deal, whether he's going to take 20 plus wickets, I feel confident that he's going to thrive under that management of Cummins and Dan Vittori. But I think that'll be a really interesting thing to watch over the course of the year. Overall, I think it's probably not quite as strong as last season, but I still think, looking through that batting lineup, it's going to be very difficult to shut them down.
All right. And on that note, let's get ratings. Matt, kick us off with the rating.
Yeah, I'll start with an 8.
Okay, that's a good score. Tom?
I'm at a 7.5.
Okay. Sriram?
I'm at a 7.
7 for Sriram.
Yeah, I'd also go 7.5.
7.5. Dustin, I'm going to go 7. Yeah, I think there's still some concerns around the depth of that squad, but who cares about their bowling options if they post 280 and 270 and whatnot. That, though, was not enough to win the IPL. It was good enough to get to the final. Right, that is an exhaustive analysis of all 10 teams. But before I leave our wonderful panel and thank them for their time, we are going to wrap this up in rapid-fire fashion. So I hope all of you are ready. I'm going to start with the boys in the studio and then go to Tom and Matt, who are online. So just a quick-fire review of the IPL auction over the last 2 days. Let's go. Best buy, Dustin.
Butler.
Rishabh Pant.
Tom.
Nitish Rana.
Matt.
Nitish Rana.
Bargain buy.
Sam Curran.
I'll say Mitchell Stark.
Okay. Tom.
Reece Topley.
Matt.
Sam Curran.
I'm going to stick with the two of you on link. Let's turn it around a little. Most surprising moment. Tom.
Venkatesh Iyer.
Matt.
Akash Ambani wandering over to the RCB table.
Sriram.
RCB bidding for Venkatesh Iyer more than Kohli.
Dustin.
I'll say Rishabh Pant going to LSG. We expected him to go at a big price, but not maybe there. So.
Which team had the best auction, Dustin?
I've said CSK and GT.
Sriram. GT. Tom.
GT.
Matt.
GT.
I'll stick with the two of you. Which team has had the most holes in their squad after this auction? Tom.
LSG.
Matt.
LSG.
Sriram.
Just auction KKR.
Dustin.
I was going to say LSG, but also RR, I'd say.
Okay.
Throw that in there.
And one unsold player who could have been bought. I'm going to have a chat about this actually after this is done. But one unsold player.
Mustafizur Rahman.
Shardul Thakur.
Tom.
Sharul Thakur.
Matt.
Prithvi Shaw.
Okay. That is a lovely quick-fire review of it. And yeah, I am going to talk about the players that haven't been picked up. And I think some of those were unexpected lines. We're not overly shocked that Jimmy Anderson didn't even get called up or have his name mentioned. Stephen Smith did have his name mentioned, but there were no suitors. Again, something we expected. So too for Kane Williamson. But David Warner, one of the IPL's all-time greats. Prithvi Shaw, as a player we thought, even if has his reasons of not being considered for national selection, would always make at least one of the 10 teams that the IPL has to offer, and yet both Shaw and David Warner find no takers. Let's get a reaction on that. Why don't you start off with Prithvi Shaw, Sriram, and what this tells us?
But I think it's just a mirror to him. People are showing the mirror. He's got to improve his fitness. He's got to show up. He's got to improve his work ethic. He's got to pile on the runs that he's capable of in domestic cricket. There's no question about his talent, and it should do more good to him than harm. The fact that he wakes up that no one's willing, 10 teams, and with so many Indian players are not willing to put one bid for him, should wake him up from deep slumber.
Yeah, and there's also the challenge of if he doesn't play in the 11, then there's also the managing aspect of it, which Tom Moody tells us, of course, is a challenge for management on keeping those players valuable and motivated, and that's also been a concern. Tom, you can have your say on Prithvi as well, and you can carry on talking about the non-bid of David Warner.
Yeah, Prithvi Shaw, I'm not hugely surprised. I just feel disappointed and sad that he's got himself in this position at such a young, talented player. And I do hope that it is the catalyst that sort of manages to for him to turn the corner that he needs to turn around, his whole professionalism, his lifestyle and everything else. And again, I'm only hearing on, what has happened historically. I haven't had first-hand experience, but he's far too good a talent not to be, playing in a 10-team IPL side. With regards to David Warner, one of the IPL greats, there's no question of that. Davey has achieved everything in the IPL. I'm not surprised that he hasn't been picked up purely on the basis that this is a new cycle. He's retired from international cricket. He's he's in his late 30s now, and the dynamic of this particular auction was very much skewed towards Indian talent, which was always going to be the case. So there was an element of starvation of funds for international players and the depth of international players, which is reflected in all the squads.
All right, and that is pretty much a wrap. Thank you very much to Tom Moody and Matt Roller. Gentlemen, it's always a pleasure. Tom, get some sleep, get some rest, and be ready and raring to go in a few months' time when we kickstart our IPL coverage. I hope to see you here then, Tom.
Isn't it the fifth day of the test tomorrow, Raunak?
It was supposed to be, Tom.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, forgot.
And Matt, always a pleasure. Look forward to your thoughts again very soon. And get on the line with Freddie and tell him everything that you haven't told us over the last hour and a half or so. Sriram,
thanks very much for having me, Ronnie.
In our studio. Cheers, Matt. Had you for the first time. I hope you've enjoyed it. Tough 2 days, but I hope you leave with a nice smile on your face. But thank you. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. Easy.
Dustin, from the days of chatter to now, it seems like the end of a project for us.
We got about 2 predictions right from our chatter episodes.
Which is 2 more than what Nagaraj and Adi got. So I think we've done well. And on that note, thank you very much. We just enjoy talking IPL. Don't take us or anything that's said too seriously. There was a time where the IPL was one on the auction table, but I think recent times, especially with the 10 teams, have shown us anyone can win the IPL. It's how they start, it's who stays fit, and so many other things that we can't even think of at this point. But thank you for your company and your questions and your thoughts. Do download the ESPN Cricket for mobile app and check out the site for what will be trends and patterns identified by the extraordinary writers that we do have. And thanks for your support to the live report, live blog, and the test match coverage. It's been an exhaustive few days, but we've had great fun bringing you all the cricket. We hope to do that again soon. For now, from all of us on Auction Day Live, powered by Maruti Suzuki Arena, it's time to say goodbye and good night.
Presenting the dazzling new Desire, the best and beyond.